Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 75. Anabiosis. We probably should have expected this part of things. No! You guys ducking the sweep of the massive sword and flickering out of the return swing. At the same moment, a spear of earth leaps up and he curses, changing direction at the very last moment. Rock scrapes his sandal as he disappears, but he does a faceplant into Zetsu's jutsu, thankfully. It probably says something about Shisui's life that this feels like a fairly significant win. You don't understand, I was trying to help! Shisui protests, landing on the bridge of a tree and stumbling one step. Itachi fends off a burst of Mokuton with a Ketan jutsu, and Shisui spares half a second of attention to chuck a Raton in the same direction before he's bolting out of Kasame's range again. The tree gives a creaking groan and spits down the middle, cleaved perfectly in half by chakra, and Shisui hates his life! Kasame chuckles, but there's no amusement in the sound at all. Looks to me like you were taking advantage of an enemy being down to finish him off, he says, and he doesn't glance back at Obito's still body, a gaping hole carved into his chest, but there's a tension to his neck and shoulders like he wants to and won't allow it of himself. Shisui will admit that's very much what it looks like, but it's not! He said there was a seal! He protests, and a series of shunshin whirl him across the clearing just in time to slice through a spray of branches that almost stab Itachi in the spine! Itachi leaps over him, intercepts Zetsu's grab with 3 perfectly placed kunai, and flings an exploding tag into the plant man's face. Well practiced in this move, Shisui grabs him and lets another shunshin sweep them away even as the tag goes off. In the smoke, Shisui can just make out the flash of a sword, the wooden wall that leaps into place to deflect it. Well, at least Kasame isn't only targeting them. Shisui can't help a glance of his own at Obito's body, can't help the curl of regret and horror all tangled up together that fills him at the sight of an oozing hole in the other man's chest. But he strangles it down, shuts it away. No time for that, no time for anything, since one of Zetsu's clones explodes from the earth, vines in a tangle around him. They wrap around Shisui, drag him down even as he throws Itachi clear, and he hacks at them desperately. The clone makes a sound of pain, and the vines pull tight in a rush, wrenching at Shisui's limbs like they're going to dry and quarter him. He only has one hand free, but he slams his tanto down as hard as he can, trying to cut through the thick creepers. The wood chips, but holds, and Shisui curses vehemently. Itachi ducks back in, driving the clone away with another exploding tag, a high kick that would have caught it in the face if it were even a second slower, and the vines don't go slack, but they're at least not getting tighter. For half a moment, Shisui contemplates just setting everything on fire, but while his pain tolerance is probably enough to let him keep fighting, even with severe burns, they'll affect his range of motion too much for it to be worth it. Which leaves hoping that Tenzo wakes up, important but not productive, or making like a lumberjack. His poor Tonto, Shisui thinks, already mourning the effort it's going to take to resharpen the blade. A flash of movement catches his eye and he jerks, instinct telling him to lunge in and put himself behind his cousin to take the blow. There's no chance of moving though, not like this, and he shouts, "Itachi!" Itachi leaps backwards over Kasame's sword, kicks off the big man's shoulder and knees him in the face, then flips, lands, and sweeps a length of ninja wire around Kasame's legs. In the same moment, Zetsu lunges at him from the other side, and Itachi vanishes at the very last second, leaving the two former Akatsuki members to collide in a tangle of limbs and curses. It takes effort not to laugh as Shisui goes back to trying to free himself. Itachi is such a clever little shit, no matter how much he plays up that poker face of his. One of the creepers finally cracks, and it's just enough give for Shisui to wriggle free, unwinding his arms and legs as best he can. At least they weren't thorny vines, he tells himself, dropping to the ground, but there's no time for that either. He's moving as soon as his sandals touch earth, lunging in to skip off the flat of Kasame's sword and knock it off course as it swings at Itachi's head. As far as ideas go, Shisui's had better. Samahara immediately sucks at his chakra and makes him yelp as his vision goes fuzzy. He drops, scrapes together just enough instinct and brain power to turn it into a roll and then twist back to his feet even as he brings his tanto around, one hand on the hilt and the other braced on the flat of the blade. Samahara slams into the much smaller weapon, and only a desperate burst of chakra keeps Shisui on his feet. Behind him, Itachi dodges Zetsu's branches, lets a dragon made of fire drive the creature back, and follows without hesitation. It takes effort not to turn and watch Itachi to make sure he's alright. Itachi's one of the best in Konoha, but he's 11! Shisui's pretty certain that most people, up to and including Fugaku and Mikoto, forget what that actually means. Still, the massive looming shark man pushing him towards the ground is a little more urgent, and Shisui grits his teeth, braces himself, and tries not to let his feet slip. The bastard is strong, and Shisui knew that, looking at that giant sword he swings so easily, but he hadn't really understood the sheer muscle mass, especially in comparison to his own. Why are you trying to kill us? Shisui demands, and he can feel himself giving ground the way the dull blade of the tanto is carving its way through his glove and into the skin beneath, but he can't let up even for a second. Kasame's grin is all sharp teeth and slow burn anger. Did you know? He asks, and the tone is light, but the look in his eyes is terrifying. All broken edges and cracked pieces held together with a deep-set rage. He told me his name. Oh no, Shisui thinks a little weakly. So Obito had something unspecified but clearly meaningful with Kasame, and Kasame just watched Takana and Nin, nominally the enemy, stab Obito in the heart. Awesome. Perfect. Fantastic. Yeah, Shisui's probably not getting out of this one with all of his limbs intact. There was a seal! Shisui tries again. On his heart, okay? He said... And it was the only thing I could... He breaks off with a hiss as more of Kisame's weight falls on Samahara, and Shisui's arms almost buckle. Half a heartbeat to throw all of his force into holding that massive sword away, and Shisui just manages to find enough breath to snarl, "He's family, damn it, I wouldn't!" A surge of dark malicious chakra nearly flattens them both. Obito, Shisui thinks for one fraction of a breath, releasing his tanto entirely as he leaps back in Kasame's moment of distraction. But it's not. Obito is still a body on the ground, and this chakra is older, sharper, darker even than his was. As it rises, the plants around them start to rise, the ground buckles and cracks, the stones tremble. Automatically, Shisui looks for Itachi, finds him lunging out of the way of a snarl of greenery that's falling like an avalanche, and triggers a Shunshin before he can even think of moving. The world blurs, and the Sharingan is just enough to let Shisui keep things straight as he reappears, snatches Itachi up, and vanishes again in a whirl of leaves. They reappear at the foot of the wall where Tenzo is lying just as trees and vines and roots come alive, breaking through the surface of twisting and starting to move. In the midst of the mass, Zetsu straightens, several long cuts across his body sealing shut. His grin is wild and unnerving, splitting his face all the way across like he's about to unhinge his jaw and swallow them whole. "I'm getting tired of you brats!" he says, full of malice, and the world around them quivers, just waiting for his signal to lunge. "Brats?" Shisui demands, because his mother and Tenzo are probably right about how not knowing when to shut up is going to get him killed someday. "You're throwing a hissy fit because we broke a statue, and we're the brats?" Zetsu's expression darkens, and he glares at Shisui with all the force of someone wanting to literally set him on fire. "Centuries!" he snarls, hands curling into fists. "I've been waiting centuries for circumstances to align, for all the pieces and all the pawns to take the board. And in the moment things come together for the first time, that little brat of an Uzumaki waltzes in and runs everything. But no matter. If you've pushed me this far, I may as well keep going and bring her back myself. Right?" A laugh unamused and full of threat, and he steps forward. The earth cracks around his feet, a burst of greenery rising up out of it like a nest of snakes, and then surges forward in a wave. There's no way to escape it. Shisui tries for a Shunshin, but even as he disappears, the spot where he was aiming to land is swallowed up, and he slares, changing course at the last minute. It's too late, though. In that split second of hesitation, something tangles around his leg and drags him down, and Shisui only just manages to snap, "Itachi, go!" as he's pulled towards the mass. Itachi doesn't argue. There's a foot on Shisui's shoulder, a push of chakra, and Itachi leaps clear, landing on top of the wall. For a moment, all Shisui can see is green, but he calls up a spark of fire that turns into a whip of flame, scorching the vines holding him, and manages to claw his way back to the surface. "Get Tenzo out of here!" he orders, and puts all of his authority as ranking shinobi into the tome, because Itachi chooses the worst moments to remember he has a spine and a will of his own. Then there's no time to worry, because he's being dragged back under, buried by roots that curl around each of his limbs like they're going to rip him apart. They catch his right hand, and Shisui recognizes what's going to happen in just enough time to brace himself before the root wrenches tight. Shisui's fingers break with an audible crack, and Shisui's breath is punched out of him in a ragged cry. "Gods, that hurts!" Still. Shisui is a shinobi. He can handle this. He can survive. A breath, another, ragged and ruined, and he doesn't let himself think about the way his hand feels like it's been dipped in acid. The throbbing agony where it's all he can do to shut it out. A third breath, and he reaches for his chakra, grabs for fire, and tries to get his other hand free. There's half a heartbeat when he thinks it's going to work. The first flicker of relief. Rough Bart catches his fingers, wraps around them, and Shisui can't do anything but grit his teeth and brace for more pain. And then the drowning green around him shudders, goes still, is trembling faintly, and a hand is thrust down into the breast, scarred arm and dark glove and pale skin and fingers close around Shisui's elbow, even as the roots and vines start to wither. There's a sharp jerk, a hard ball, and then Shisui is surfacing, stumbling into the hold of the man who saved him. Obito doesn't look up at him, face set in sharp lines of concentration and intent, and the spark of chakra in the air becomes a flood, heavy and tasting of sharp, sweet sap in the back of Shisui's throat. He sucks in a full breath, cradling his hand against his chest and ignoring the drip of blood that means bone is broken the skin, focusing instead on the neat hole torn in Obito's robe with smooth skin underneath. "It worked!" he manages, and relief and trepidation are a heady mix. It worked! One corner of Obito's mouth pulls down, and it's an expression so far from the boy Shisui knew 7 years ago that he can't even begin to interpret it.
"You're an idiot,"
is what Obito says, though he still doesn't look at Shisui.
"You had the chance to get rid of an enemy. Didn't the Academy teach you anything?"
Shisui wants to laugh, not quite relief, and not quite victory, and not quite bitterness, but caught somewhere between the three. "What do you think I was doing?" he retorts, and it's so weird to know this is Obito, his Obito, the boy who first showed him how to rig a trap. Weird to look down at him since Shisui is a good bit taller. Weird to see the scars, the darkness in his eyes, the age in his face. Eerie and incredibly unsettling to know that Obito is the tactical genius Kurama warned them about so sharply. That Obito is the enemy. Or was. That at least gets him a look quite unreadable, but with an edge of exasperation that's all too familiar. An arm wraps around Shisui's waist and the air warps. There's an instant of vertigo where Shisui can't quite figure out which way is up, but then their feet hit stone. Obito lets go of him, takes 2 steps to the edge of the wall to look down on the battlefield, and the hatred in his expression is incandescent, almost inhuman.
"Stay there! Zetsu is mine!"
he tells Shisui barely above a growl, and with a step off the edge he vanishes in another twist of air. "Right," Shisui agrees belatedly and winces when a step back jars his hand. "I'll just let you handle the insane plant thing. Go!" Zetsu screams, fury and thorn and rage, and the trees tremble. Obito flickers into existence in the air, a long staff already swinging, and around him shurikens sweep forward, propelled with more force than a human hand could give them. The weapons sweep through the reaching vines, and Obito dives between them, sharpened end of the staff stabbing down and driving through Zetsu's chest with a sickening wet bud. Zetsu makes a sound of fury, more dagger-like roots stepping up, but Obito opens his mouth and breathes out flame, then leaps back up and disappears into thin air. There's a roar from somewhere in the mass of green and a momentary surge of water that's quickly reburied. But an instant later, Obito appears above the spot, dropping down through the roots like a ghost. A pause, and Shisui can't quite help holding his breath, bracing for anything. An explosion of flames and distorted air, a vortex of fire that burns away the covering greenery, and Obito hauls Kasame up out of the smoking rubble and burning vegetation. The big man staggers a step, but Obito catches him by the arm, pulls him back upright, and the look on Kasame's face almost makes Shisui want to turn away. "You're alive," Kasame says, fear and nearly disbelieving. He slings Samahara over his shoulder, reaching up with his free hand, and his fingers sink into Obito's loose hair where the wild strands spill past his shoulders. Obito's smile is faint and crooked, but still definitely present as he glances up at Kasame. He doesn't touch Kasame in return, but he doesn't move away either, and his eyes meet Kasame's squarely as he says,
If this is the foundation of Mandara's world without lies.
Kisame grins.
All teeth.
And in a surge of movement, he whirls around Obito Samahata, sweeping out to carve a path through a wooded dome that tries to surround them. Drowning dense chakra shatters the jutsu, tears through creeping branches, buckles the ground, and Shisui is suddenly vividly reminded that Kisame's nickname is the Tailless, Tail-Based. Even after hanging around the majority of the Jinchuriki for the past few weeks and seeing them use more chakra offhand and without thought than Shisui has probably used in his entire life, Kisame still manages to be terrifyingly impressive.
Oh, but we never lied to you, Kisame.
Zetsu says, poised and sweet as he rises halfway from the ground.
The boy is weak, mindless without those lies to lead him, but you're full of resolve. Together we can still save this.
Kisame's expression darkens, but before he can answer, Obito snarls, phasing right through Kisame's governing bolt to slam the staff he's holding into Zetsu's throat. It's the move that practically got him killed 10 minutes ago, but this time instead of pausing, Obito leaps using his grip to drag Zetsu up and out of the earth. In the same moment, Kisame's chakra redoubles the scales, covering Samahata fluttering, and he brings his sword around in a sweeping slash that carves right through two-tone flesh. Zetsu screams, wrecked and wavering, and his form splits. Long creepers wrench closed around Obito like a fly trap, snapping shut. But Obito drops to the ground intangible and then drives a kunai up into Zetsu's jaw. The creature reels back and Obito spins, slamming a kick into his gut and launching him backwards. As smoothly as if they've been fighting together all of their lives, Kisame steps in, bulldozing straight through a thicket of stabbing branches and going in for another shredding sweep of Samahata's blade. Zetsu splits around it, flicks a hand, and catches Kisame in the chest with a pillar of stone that bursts from the ground and then turns sharply to intercept the flurry of kunai Obito sends spinning at his head. Shards of wood fly, and Obito phases through them, drops to the ground, and flashes a hand sign. The air warps, and fire streams out in a vortex, given momentum and force. It slams into Zetsu with a smell that's something between burning plant matter and scorched flesh, and it takes effort for Shisui not to gag. Still, he's seen Zetsu shake off too many blows to think that's the end of it. And, as is entirely expected by now, there's a ripple of flesh that moves like that bubbling ichor from the mountain's graveyard, and Zetsu drags himself back together with an angry hiss.
A useless little traitor like you can't even begin to harm me,
he snarls.
Give it up now and I might kill you before I rip that eye of yours out of your head.
Shisui winces. If there's any threat that will move in Uchiha, it's that one, and surely even Obito isn't exempt from that.
Obito's scoff is cold and derisive. Kamui is why you kept me alive in the first place, isn't it?
He says, and it's not a question. The laugh Zetsu gives is high and sharp.
Strains of the Sharingan run through family lines. But you came from a family that had never manifested the Sharingan before. Two civilians, one not even full Uchiha, and yet here you are, carrying one of the most powerful manifestations I've ever seen. Only the boy up there rivals you. Did you know that?
This is not a conversation Shisui wants to be part of, especially since it started with ripping out eyes. He doesn't take a step back, though, despite how much he wants to. He hadn't known that Obito's parents weren't shinobi, that one of them was only partly Uchiha. It doesn't really explain the way people look down on him as a child, the derisive whispers in the clan, but it certainly explains some of it. The Uchiha don't tend to like anyone who muddies their gene pool. Though, Shisui thinks with wry amusement, they just lost one of their main arguments against it in Obito. There's no way having mixed blood has weakened him at all. Before Shisui can find the appropriate words to tell Zetsu to keep his scummy hands off Uchiha eyes in general, and his in particular, Obito takes half a step forward, drawing Zetsu's gaze again. There's a cold fury in his face, something deeply buried and clearly not new.
You're not going to get any more Uchiha to go along with your plans,
he says darkly.
It's over, Zetsu.
Zetsu laughs.
I'm sure you think it is,
he says mockingly.
But I've been doing this for longer than you can even imagine, traitor. One setback is hardly going to stop me, and Konoha is just rife with ambitious brats who can be so easily twisted. What about that child, the clan head's youngest son? So far under his brother's shadow, passing unnoticed, never good enough. I'm sure he could fit our needs nicely.
Sasuke. Shisui thinks feeling sick. He means Sasuke, bright and cheerful and adoring of Itachi, and maybe it's because Shisui has been a shinobi too long, seen too many people fall to darkness, but it's not unimaginable to think of Sasuke in Obito's place, driven to destroy the world in the name of saving it. People are corruptible, that's the tragedy of them. All someone needs is the right trigger. In the end, Obito looks mostly unmoved by the threat, which is probably understandable. Itachi was too precocious to need his attention as a babysitter, and Sasuke wasn't even born when Obito's mission went south. He doesn't know either of them, but he does flick a glance at Shisui's face, no doubt taking in the horror there, before he turns back to Zetsu.
No more!
He repeats flat and cold and disappears in a ripple of air. In the same moment, Kasame lunges as well, laugh rough but intent, and before Zetsu can retreat, he has to duck Samahada's edge. Then a whirl of branches from Obito as he reappears, practically on top of the creature. The Mokutan puts Zetsu off balance, gives Kasame enough of an opening to flip Samahada up and bring it crashing down right on top of Zetsu's head. There's a spray of ichor, a wild eruption of plant life that makes the ground look like it's boiling, and Zetsu screams! A heartbeat later, a spiral of air spits both Obito and Kasame out on top of the wall, a handful of paces from Shisui, and Obito makes a quiet sound of tempered rage as he stares down at the writhing vines.
We need to find a way to stop him healing,
he tells Kasame.
Like this, it won't matter what we do. He keeps shaking it off.
I think Kakashi and Kurama were saying the same thing about you after the fight in the pass, Shisui says, forcing cheer into his tone even as he's gingerly dropping into a crouch. It's less to make himself a smaller target and more because his head is spinning from a mix of adrenaline, pain, and blood loss. Obito blinks once before his eyes narrow.
A seal of his chakra,
he says, making the leap in an instant. For a moment, he mulls it over, but then shakes his head.
I'm not an Uzumaki.
Kasame scratches his nose bashfully, nodding his head. I also failed my sealing unit in school, he agrees sheepishly. I haven't improved much since then either. Lovely. Shisui's pants at Finjutsu as well, so there's that idea gone. He grimaces, shifting his hand a little, and tries not to pay attention to the way his vision wavers and goes white around the edges. Opening his mouth, he glances up at Obito. A flash of crimson, a black edged red like a hungry mouth gaping wide, and Kurama slams into Obito with all the force of an avalanche, knocking him clear off the wall! They tumble over the edge, Kurama wrapped around Obito and swinging with his claws bared, and Kasame has time for a startled shout and a step before Kakashi hits him from behind, hurling him back in the opposite direction! An instant later, Kakashi is passing in a flash, just slow enough for Shisui to catch his captain's glance at him, the cold determination in mismatched eyes. Oh gods! Of all the things Shisui forgot to account for, this seems like the biggest and most important! He scrambles to his feet, almost trips and falls headlong off the wall as his vision whites out and feels fur against his hand half a second before this sharp jerk. The vertigo is still making him woozy, but he catches sight of snowy fur and bushy tails and gasps out, Thanks, Fuji, you're a goddess! Fuji, the size of a pony and rippling with foxfire, makes a pleased sound as she hauls him back by his flak jacket and dumps him on a more secure patch of stone. Well, in 6 tails I will be, she allows proudly and crouches down next to him, eyeing the steady drip of blood from his broken fingers with concern. Maybe you should save the jumping around for later. Later implies that Kurama and Kakashi won't be so distracted kicking Obito's admittedly deserving butt that they let Zetsu jump them and die in an embarrassing and mostly preventable way. Not that Kurama will die easily, Shisui is sure, but still, why take chances? No, he says, scrambling back to his feet with slightly more care this time. I have to get down there, it's not what they think! While Obito is distracted trying to fend off one of Kurama's force waves, Kakashi sweeps in under his guard, knocks him back with an elbow to the throat, and punches him square in the face hard enough that Shisui can hear the crack of bone from all the way at the top of the wall. Fuji makes a deeply skeptical sound. You really want to get in between Kurama-sama and that guy? She asks doubtfully. Because I might not be a Momiji, but even I can still think of better ways to die. A good point, Shisui allows with a grimace. But he's not about to stay up here and let them duke it out while Zetsu is still conspicuously absent. There's no time, and Obito said he wasn't an Uzumaki and he couldn't steal Zetsu's chakra, but Kurama is, and Chisui's willing to bet that he can come up with something. This is stupid, he says, closes his eyes and takes a breath. Okay, I am stupid. Oh gosh, I'm an idiot, and if I make it out of this in less than 3 pieces, I'm going to kiss Tenzo. I'm going to kiss Tenzo on the mouth! Fuji blinks at him, cocking her head quizzically. Do all humans kiss each other after a victory? She asks. The Dark Man kissed Kurama-sama too. Is it a tradition? Kakashi kissed Kurama. Shisui really doesn't want to think about that right now. Or, well, he does, which is the problem. Especially since Kurama and Kakashi are both down there, and Shisui's going to have to look them in the face in about 3 seconds. Shisui hates being a teenager. He particularly hates being a teenager surrounded by scary, pretty people with far too much power and the ability to flatten him if they decided to put a bit of effort into things. I'll tell you later, he promises, dragging his brain back under control. Pictures kissing Tenzo how he's wanted to in a low-key, angsty, I'm too dignified for finding a way, ever since they shared a room in Frost Country, and straightens. His hand is still throbbing, but it's ignorable, unimportant. More important is the way Obito just cried out the vicious stare of a Bijudama through flesh, and Shisui opens his eyes in time to see Obito go staggering back, landing on one knee on the ground with Kurama looming above him. Shisui's known as the fastest shinobi since Namikaze Minato for a reason. His use of the Shunshin is unparalleled, unbeatable, instinctive at this point. He can do it half dead or half conscious or entirely drunk. Managed to get halfway across Fire Country before running out of chakra once. This is nothing. A breath, a flicker of green-white chakra, and a whirl of leaves sweeps him off the edge of the wall, the world blurring with the speed of his passage. The field they're fighting on is large, but Shisui's across it in the space of a heartbeat, knocking Kakashi's Tanto to the side as he reappears in a burst of wind, braced in front of Obito. Kurama's in front of him, spinning orb of black and purple light at his fingertips, and Shisui watches it fly towards his face with a grim sense of horror, thinks, this is how I die, isn't it? And Kurama pulls up short, chakra spinning like a contained hurricane 3 centimeters from Chisui's nose, and growls. Yeah, Shisui thinks with a sinking feeling in his chest. This is definitely how he's going to die.